I'm 81 years old. I used to think that meant I had survived life. Lately, it feels more like I've simply outlived my chances to fix it.
At this age, the house is too quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet in a way that reminds you who isn't there. The clocks sound louder. The refrigerator hums like it's keeping me company. And most mornings, before the sun comes up, I lie awake and think about her. She loved me for years. I realized it too late. When you're young, you believe love will announce itself properly. You think it will arrive dramatic and undeniable. You don't imagine it might be standing right in front of you, patient, ordinary, steady, waiting for you to notice. I didn't notice, or maybe I did and I chose not to look too closely. Back then, I was busy becoming someone. That's what I told myself. I was in my late 20s when I met her. I had plans, big ones. I wanted to prove something to the world, to my father, to myself. I worked long hours, said yes to every opportunity, shook every hand that might open a door. She worked in the same building, different apartment. Quiet woman, not the kind who demanded attention. She had a calm way about her, the kind that makes you feel less rushed just standing near her. The first time we had coffee, it wasn't even a date, just two coworkers with an hour to spare. I remember she listened more than she talked, asked small questions, remembered the answers later. I mistook that for politeness. Over the years, we became close. Lunches turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks after work. She knew how I took my coffee. She knew when I was pretending to be confident. She could tell when I was tired, even if I insisted I wasn't. I told myself we were just good friends. There were moments, though, moments I replay now like old film. Once I was sick for a week, bad flu. I lived alone then. I remember waking up to a knock at the door. She stood there holding a bag of groceries and a thermometer. She didn't make a big speech, just said, "You sounded terrible on the phone." She stayed, made soup, changed the cold cloth on my forehead, sat in the chair by my bed and read while I slept. I thanked her when I got better. That was it. Another time I was up for a promotion. I didn't get it. I came home angry, embarrassed. I told myself I was fine. She didn't argue, just sat with me in silence. After a while, she said, "You don't have to win everything to be worth something." I shrugged it off, told her she didn't understand how the world worked. She looked at me in a way I didn't understand then. There were men who noticed her, better men probably, kinder, more present. I saw them circle. I never felt threatened. I assumed she wasn't going anywhere. That was my first mistake. I thought there would always be more time. In my 30s, work took over completely. I traveled often, missed birthdays, missed small gatherings she invited me to. She would ask, gently, "Are you sure you can't make it?" And I would say, "Next time." There's always a next time when you're young. I remember one evening clearly. She had cooked dinner at her apartment. Nothing fancy, just pasta and a bottle of wine. The lights were low, music playing softly from the kitchen radio. She looked nervous. I didn't understand why. Halfway through dinner, she said, "Do you ever think about us?" I laughed, not cruelly, just casually. I said something like, "What about us? We're good, aren't we?" She held my gaze a little too long. Then she nodded. "Yes," she said. "We're good." I went home that night feeling proud of myself. I had avoided complication. I had kept things simple. I told myself I didn't want to ruin a good friendship, that relationships were messy, that commitment would slow me down. The truth is, I liked being loved without having to choose. She never pressured me, never demanded a label. That was her way. Steady, patient, always there. And I mistook patience for permanence. In my early 40s, I finally got the promotion I'd been chasing for years. Bigger office, more responsibility, longer hours. I celebrated with colleagues. I called her later that night. She was happy for me, truly, I could hear it in her voice. But there was something else too, a distance. Not anger, just quiet. We still met for coffee, still talked, but something had shifted. I noticed she didn't look at me the same way anymore. There was less hope in her eyes, more acceptance. I didn't ask about it. Around that time, she started seeing someone. She told me one afternoon, like it was a small detail. "I've been going out with someone from my cousin's church," she said. I nodded, said that was great, asked what he did for work. I remember feeling a strange tightness in my chest, not enough to act, just enough to notice.
I told myself it was natural. Of course she would date. She deserved to. I assumed it wouldn't last. He was a school teacher, widower, 2 children. Not impressive by my standards back then. I had become a man who measured people by titles and income. She stopped calling as often, not abruptly, just gradually. Our dinners became rare, our conversations shorter. I thought, she'll come back around. But love doesn't wait forever. It fades quietly when it isn't met. The turning point 10 years later. I was in my 50s, divorced by then. Yes, I eventually married someone else. A relationship built on attraction and ambition. It looked right on paper. It didn't last. By the time that marriage ended, I found myself thinking about her again, wondering if maybe the timing would finally be right. I looked her up, found out she had married that school teacher. They had raised their children together. She had left her job years earlier. I told myself I was happy for her. One winter afternoon, I received a call from an old coworker. He mentioned her name casually, said her husband had passed away after a long illness. The words hit me in a place I didn't expect. I waited a week before reaching out. I didn't want to seem opportunistic. That's what I told myself. The truth is, I was afraid. When we finally met, it was at a small cafe near the hospital where she had spent so much time. She looked older, of course, we both did, but there was a softness in her face I recognized. We talked for hours, about her husband, about the children, about the years I had missed. At one point she said, he was a good man. He showed up, every day. I nodded. Then she added, almost absent-mindedly, I used to wait for you to show up like that. She didn't say it to hurt me, it was just a fact. Something inside me shifted then. Not jealousy, not regret in the dramatic sense. Just clarity. I saw the whole thing at once. All the small moments I had dismissed. All the chances I had postponed. All the times she had stood in front of me, offering something real. And how I had chosen to keep my hands in my pockets. After that day, we saw each other a few more times. There was warmth between us, history, but there was also distance that couldn't be erased. Love has seasons. I had missed ours. One evening, as we were saying goodbye outside her apartment, I almost said it. I almost told her I had been blind, that I had loved her too in my own foolish way, that I sorry. But I looked at her face, calm, content in a way I had never allowed myself to be. And I realized my confession would be for me, not for her. So I said nothing. She moved to another city a year later to be closer to her stepchildren. We exchanged a few letters after that, then fewer, then none. I heard through a mutual friend that she passed away quietly in her sleep 5 years ago. No drama, no last words, just gone. Now in 81, I sit in this quiet house and understand what I lost. Not a grand romance, not fireworks, something better. I lost the chance to be known completely by someone who had already decided I was enough. I chased admiration. She offered acceptance. I chose ambition. She offered presence. I assumed I was generous. It wasn't. The strange thing is, my life wasn't a failure. I had success, money, recognition, stories to tell at dinner parties. But when the guests stopped coming, none of that sat beside me in the dark. Regret doesn't come from what you tried and failed at. It comes from what you never allowed to begin. If you're young, you might think you have years to decide. Years to figure out who matters. Years to circle back. Maybe you do. Or maybe someone is loving you quietly right now. Not loudly. Not perfectly. Just steadily. And maybe they won't wait forever. I don't blame my younger self entirely. He was afraid. Afraid of choosing wrong. Afraid of settling. Afraid of slowing down. He didn't understand that love isn't what slows you down. It's what steadies you while you move. Now he moves Saki anyway. Not my choice. Sometimes I sit by the window in the late afternoon and imagine what it would have been like. A smaller house, perhaps. Fewer promotions. More shared meals. More ordinary evenings. Her reading in a chair. Me pretending to watch television while really watching her. It wouldn't have been dramatic. Just fall. I don't cry about it anymore. Tears belong to earlier stages of regret. What I feel now is quieter. Acceptance, maybe. And gratitude, too. Because for a long time, someone loved me well. Even if I didn't know how to receive it. That's more than some people ever get. If this means something to you, I hope you pay attention to the steady ones. The ones who show up without applause. The ones who don't demand, but remain.